I'm your host, Damian Pardo, and welcome to the 4WardMiami show. 4WardMiami is an organization that works exclusively on diversity and inclusion in South Florida. And with me today, I have Francesco Duberli. Francesco, welcome.
Thank you, Damian.
Francesco's the CEO of Survivors Pathway, and actually, this came to life because we had done another segment with Catherine Fernandez Rundle,
Oh, great.
and we were talking about sex trafficking. We were talking about Formula One and how events in Miami, sex trafficking occurs around them. And then there was some late breaking news yesterday about a doctor in Mount Sinai, Dr. Lee, who had been, I guess, helping a sex trafficker engage with girls,
Wow.
young girls.
Mhm.
And it really struck me. That's one of the reasons I really wanted you on the show today. It struck me that this is way more common than people are aware. And that's really frightening because we're talking about, from what I understand, we're talking about 60% of our youth. It's here, it's local. It's not people that are being brought here. I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about your organization and speak to those points.
Sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, Miami is the third in the nation in cases of sex trafficking, and unfortunately, sex trafficking is affecting the youth, right? And I don't think it's like you said, right? Not all people are aware of how trafficking, sex and labor trafficking affect our communities, and it's incredible to hear that. I mean, it's so prevalent that sometimes people that you don't even think they could do that, you see them then engaging into encouraging or buying individuals that are being commercially exploited, and that's a huge issue in Dade County, which Catherine in the state attorney's office has taken that issue very seriously, and they're working in Survivors Pathway, which we're a justice center here in Miami-Dade County, working for victims of different crimes: domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, hate crimes, and many other type of violent crimes. And we've been for years, 10, 12 years, working in the area of sex trafficking. And we know, right, how vulnerable some communities are in regards of becoming victims of this crime. And unfortunately, again, we know, for instance, that our immigrants, right, Latino immigrants, young guys, especially transgender people, gay people, and women that emigrate to Miami and to United States, unfortunately, sometimes looking for that American dream, they end up into those nets of trafficking, and that's super sad.
Well, I would think on top of that, if you're gay or trans or any minority status, women, immigrant, you can't speak the language, you're even more vulnerable because you're more outside the fray.
Yeah, and the thing is, and you don't speak the language. Most of the cases, you don't have documentation. And Miami has this huge sex industry, right? It's huge, and there's so much money running in this business.
When you say sex industry, what do you mean? Like
prostitution? Like Miami. It's huge.
I mean, I know that's a naive statement on my part, but
yeah,
I know, but I mean, I guess I don't see it the way that I would expect it if it were that big.
The sex industry in Miami is huge. I mean, I think.
Is it mainly online now? Is that why it's
no,
not?
I mean, that's one of the things that it's struck people. It's when that there's streets in Miami where you can buy sex, right? And sometimes you drive through those areas, but if you're not aware of that, you might just go through it without having that consciousness, right? But there's areas in Miami where you see young ladies and young kids walking up and down, selling their bodies, and then many of them are minors, and many of those people have pimps.
They have pimps.
Yeah, pimps that are the ones who are controlling, let's say the areas. And then you have the online, right? Online is huge. You have all these apps that are now available where people can buy sex. And the issue with this is that is how we know that those that are in those apps, those that are on the streets, on the clubs, on the strip clubs, are not minors, right? Because that's one of the greatest issues that we have, is protecting our minors so that they're not sexually exploited and they're not taken from these people and used for sex, right? We need to be very careful about that. And also that how many people of those that are, for instance, in those apps in OnlyFans and in other venues where sex is sold, that they're not forced, they're not being coerced to engage in this type of activities.
I mean, isn't that kind of like a fine line though between, being forced and having no other remedy than to engage in that to survive? I mean,
yeah, I mean, but at least in the context of the law for human trafficking, you have to be. I mean, if you're a minor, you immediately are a victim of sex trafficking. But there's not such a thing as a minor doing sex work. You know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
So minor under 18, immediately that's considered a sex trafficking case. Yeah, if it's a minor. Younger than 18 years old. Now, if you are older than 18, you have to, there's three categories that has to be taken into consideration to consider a case under a law, federal law and a state law, a sex trafficking case. And then there's the need for fraud, force, or coercion, right? And if you go in depth into those definitions, that opens lots of doors, right? In terms of identifying and understanding and interpreting under the law, how is a person being forced or coerced or fraud, right? So, and it's very broad. And at the end, what we're seeing is that unfortunately, many of those that are in the sex industry, at the end, they're being victims of sex trafficking, right? Because there's a lot of coercion on it. I mean, we see lots of cases of women that immigrate to the United States and then their passport has been removed because they have to pay the debt. Because, the pimps pay for the trip and for all the documentation to come to the United States under the promise that they have to pay that, and then they have to pay the food and the living conditions and all the stuff. That's sex trafficking, right? Things like, for instance, providing transportation. We have had cases, for instance, of Uber drivers providing transportation to minors to do sex work. That's sex trafficking. You cannot benefit. Under the law, you cannot benefit.
So the hotel would be responsible
of
too,
course,
or any business.
Any business that consciously, get benefit and allow an activity like that.
It's crazy to me that a physician at a prominent hospital would be involved in sex trafficking. And it's scary because I wonder how many other people who maybe you would never think of as participating.
Yeah, unfortunately, it works that way. I mean, you find cases that are unbelievable, right? Even for the same victim, which I think is one of the greatest issues. Sometimes that victims are not aware that they're being victimized, right? And there's this concept of the Romeo pimp. And the Romeo pimp is this guy who pretend to be the person that loves the victim. Right. Yeah, it's
the Romeo pimp.
The Romeo pimp, right? And then says, I love you and I'm here for you and I will take care of you. But in reality, it's not loving the person, it's not taking care of the person, it's exploiting the person, it's creating the means to sexually exploit that person and get benefit out of that. But then when you talk with the victims, unfortunately, they consider that person a good person, a person that is taking care of them, a person that is given to them, and they don't see, right, the reality of what's behind that so-called love. And
isn't that also true with domestic violence? Isn't that also true with women and men that are in relationships that are abusive and they don't see it?
Of course. And there's a lot of correlations between domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. For instance, we have many cases that arrive to Survivor's Pathway, for instance, as a domestic violence case. And then once we open the door to engage into the conversation in regards of the case itself, then we realize that it's not just only domestic violence, that there's also the component of sex trafficking, you see? And at the same time, you have sex trafficking cases in which you encounter domestic violence. Now, when it's just domestic violence, the only difference is in domestic violence, there's not sexual exploitation per se, right? It's not necessary, and then domestic violence, you have sexual exploitation, because domestic violence, it's other different type of abuse. But they correlate.
I'm confused on that. Does that mean that you can just have domestic violence that has nothing to do with sex?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I abuse a partner or anybody that live with me in my
But
household,
they can also be the same. They can also be.
Yeah, they can correlate.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you can abuse a person and at the same time sexually exploited that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, there's the two crimes.
Mm-hmm.
But then it can be just abuse, can be physical or sexual abuse, and then it's just domestic violence.
And in your organization, what do you see the most? What is the most common kind of scenario that's playing out in South Florida?
Let me give you these numbers. During the 2021, we served 3,000 people. 3,000, which I think for a small organization is a huge number, right? Because most of these people were victims of something, any type of crime, right? But among those 3,000 people, 480 individuals were victims of domestic violence. Being then domestic violence, the leading crime on the in the cases that we see, 480. And the interesting part of this is that most of that, I would say like 90% are women. So now we know that women, the statistics shows that women are highly vulnerable to be victims of domestic violence. And on the other hand, we have same-sex relationships, right? The only thing with gay relationships that are in victimization is that we do not have statistics. We don't collect that. So it's difficult for us to actually have because our legal system is not equipped to collect that data. Like for instance, if you're my partner and I'm abusing you, and then you pick up the phone and you call the police, when they arrived and they do the report, the report does not have the capability to force or allow the person that is taking that report to check if you're gay, same-sex relationship, none of that. So we're never gonna know if that case is a gay, lesbian, bi. It's just.
I mean, that's the same argument why the LGBTQ community fights so hard to be included in the census and to be included in all these things. Because if you're not included in that way, you don't count. You're just not. Count. Yeah, you're not seen.
Exactly. And for instance, one of the issues that we used to have is lethality, right? People sometimes don't know about that, but domestic violence has high levels of lethality. There's a lot of people that are murdered in
we see on the news a lot of times gun-related, domestic violence play out.
Yeah, and then it's very difficult for us to know, for instance, how many gay men has been killed in domestic violence incidents, right? Even though a couple of years or 3 years ago, the fatality.
But let me ask you something. You guys are a separate organization, so in some ways, can't you just put the box yourself?
I mean, we do. I mean, I guess, and I dare to say this: the only organization out there to say in the state of Florida that collect that information is Survivors Pathway, right? So we do have the numbers.
So I'm interested. So what percent do you think would that be then of what you see?
In terms of, that's what I was saying. The numbers are pretty high in domestic violence and sexual. So human trafficking is devastating for the LGBT community. Like, I'm going to give you this number. Years ago, we did a survey with the transgender community, Latina, immigrant, transgender. And we surveyed 450 Latina transgender women. It was the highest number of transgender women that has ever been surveyed, talking and asking about different crimes, right? And unfortunately, 92% of them stated that they work in the sex industry. 92%, which is a huge number.
That's a huge number.
And if you talk about 92% of transgender Latina immigrant women working in the sex industry, then that's going to give you a number of the impact of sex trafficking, right? Now, when we ask about the ages and that they started engaging into sex and into sex industry, right? 36% says that they were minors. 36%, which is huge.
That is
right?
huge.
It's huge because yeah. So and the impact, right? Because we have that community often coming to us, it's big. Right now, we're seeing, for instance, a very interesting increase into gay minors and youth, like 18 to 24 Latino immigrants from Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, being sexually exploited, right? Once they arrive to Miami or in the journey that they do between, I don't know, Cuba and Colombia and Venezuela to get into the United States. So it's really prevalent.
And in the domestic violence cases, if more or less 496 were domestic violence,
yes,
of that share, how many would you say were gay?
Well, this is the thing. For instance, our numbers for the gay community and the lesbian are pretty low, but take into consideration also that the community is low, right? But also, there's another barrier in terms of collecting good statistics, right?
I would think so.
And it's that we do not report.
Exactly.
We don't, because it's complex, right? Different to cisgender heterosexual women, that they have this great system of care and support. We do not have that. And we have specific matters that are very complex. One, which I consider the most complex, is that the places that we gather are so few, right? It's not that we have the whole city. Our clubs are just like, for instance, in Miami, what do you have? Azúcar, maybe some places in Miami.
Twist, maybe.
Twist, right? Now, if you abuse me, right? And then I want to call the police and pursue justice against you, then I have to face the fact that even if I have a restraining order, I might have to be in the same place that you're going to be hanging out, right?
Yeah.
In the same gay bar. And then what's going to happen with our friends, right? Are going to be excluded. How are we going to deal with that? Because our social system, it's very small. And sometimes people don't think about that.
Well, and I would think it's embarrassing. The whole thing is embarrassing.
It's embarrassing.
I mean, you have to go before... I can't even imagine calling an officer and reporting abuse to.
Yeah, that's another thing, right? Because the thing is, unfortunately, and even though the police department has advanced a lot, right?
Oh, no, and it's not on them. It's not on them. It's on my own.
No, and it's complicated, right? When they arrive to the scene and there's the two men or two women claiming DVKs, right? How they react, but also the stigma associated with it. That's the stigma.
Yeah.
And that lead us to not to report, right? To under-report. And that's why the statistics are very limited. And then we have people coming, and let me tell you, it's a big number. I think we have like 100 and something gay people that are receiving services as victims of domestic violence. The same happened with sexual assault. There's a lot of stigma and fear, and unfortunately, it's very prevalent, sexual assault, especially with the issues that we have with substance abuse now. But we do not report.
One thing I wanted to touch upon, because first of all, I want to say I'm very impressed by your organization, by Survivors Pathway.
Thank you.
Because it doesn't matter where I go, which committees I'll sit on, or who I talk to, they all say the exact same thing. They say Survivors Pathway does an amazing job.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it.
Kudos to all of you. You're doing great work.
Thanks.
But I wanted to go that route because I'd like people to understand that if you're a victim, what's available. Because I've spoken to different people who say that they're very frustrated because lots of people who are actually victims have no idea that they can have an advocate, that they can have services. And that's a lot of what your organization does. It plugs people into how to get those services, how to get help.
Yes, and that's a great question. I appreciate that. First of all, the people that are watching this show and listen to you, and they're victims now of any crime, they have to know that they're not alone, right? That they have Survivors Pathway. And when I said that, it's a huge statement, because when you are being victimized, there's so many things going on, right? Trauma, and especially if you are from a minority, a vulnerable community, an immigrant, that you're full of fear and stigma, and you don't know what to do. Then Survivors Pathway then have this strong presence into help. And how do we help? We have a very interesting, comprehensive, and holistic approach. We have everything that a victim needs, from a victim advocate that is going to assist that person to navigate the justice system.
By the way, I've been impressed with the victim advocates.
Have you seen the victim advocates?
Yeah, I think they're excellent. I mean, they're there to do that job.
And you know what is important? Because, Damian, we have an amazing criminal justice system in the United States. It's amazing. I think it's one of the greatest in the world. But it's so complex. It's so complex. It's so complex.
It really is.
And then add that maybe you don't speak the language. You come from another country. and then you're traumatized, right? And the fourth one, which I think is the most complex, you come from countries where there's no justice,
right?
And then you learned that in your country you do not believe in justice and you don't trust the system. So when you put those four factors into place, what people does is like, oh, I don't know what to do, and then impunity,
sure.
which is my greatest fear, impunity, right? Impunity comes in.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by
the criminal can walk along and walk away happy because nothing happened, and the victim is just hiding, figuring out what to do, and there's no justice. It's impunity, right? When you just let the criminal just walk away happy, and then that's what we don't want. We want justice, and we want those that commit a crime to pay for that crime. And how we do it with a victim advocate? The victim advocate take that victim by the hand and they provide representation. They take it to the court. We call the police. We work with all police departments, with the state attorney's office, with the FBI, with Homeland Security. All these huge institutions are our friends. Then we communicate with them, right? We work hand to hand with these people so that we guarantee that victims have access to the system, at least, right? And then we work so hard for them to successfully achieve justice. And then, so we have the victim advocates, and then we have mental health counselors, free because all this is free.
That's excellent.
8 years of mental health counseling and psychotherapy, free for a year and even more, right? And we facilitate, can be virtual at home, at a facility, because we know that trauma impact the person a lot. And that trauma has a huge impact in justice and the justice process. Because when you're traumatized, chances are that you're not going to go to court. For instance, a restraining order, you have to face the perpetrator in a case, for instance, of domestic violence. And if you are traumatized and if you're alone and if you're in fear, chances are that you're not going to feel comfortable sitting in the same courtroom facing that person that abused you. But now you have a counselor that goes with you and a victim advocate that goes with you. It's a whole system, right? And then we have financial assistance, which is one of the good programs, because we know that the devastation, the financial devastation that victimization causes in an individual and how much they need, right? Emergency housing, like when you need to move a person from that place where they might be in danger, like to another place like that, like. And so we pay hotels, we pay rent, we pay phones, we pay utilities, we pay for food, we pay for whatever it's needed for them to move forward and to start a new life, right? So we have support groups. We have our HIV program, because interesting enough is that we have seen the correlation between domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and HIV. There's a very interesting correlation, and unfortunately, victims of sex trafficking end up being positive for HIV.
Yeah.
So we provide the whole system of care so that, because imagine how complicated it is.
It kind of, I mean, there is kind of a sense to that, meaning that if you can't take care of yourself, then you're just going to be victim to whatever comes your way.
And sometimes,
including health issues that
you get in those cycles.
You can't control.
Yeah. So Survivor's Path, we have all these many different programs. We have also a food assistance project, which we deliver food every month. I mean, we guarantee food monthly to our clients. So that's
incredible.
Yeah. So
that's just incredible. That's really.
So we try to fulfill all the needs that a victim can have, so that they can walk away from that system of victimization, and then they can get into our system of justice and pursue justice. This is obviously thanks to the donations and the support of great people in Miami-Dade County that trust us and believe in us and what we do. And that's why I have been so successful into assisting victims in South Florida.
There's something that always sticks out in my mind, a statistic about Miami-Dade County that a lot of people don't talk about. That's that 60% of the people here do not speak English in the home.
Yeah.
That's. I feel like there's a society that.
And there used to be 82%.
Wow.
So now you're saying it comes down to 60. 10 years ago, it was 82%.
So that always makes me think of kind of this society that's moving this way, and then another one that's completely unseen or little seen. And I wonder, given that statistic and given the vulnerability to all of the issues you're talking about, whether it's rape, domestic violence, sex trafficking, whether the issue of language and the issue of resources comes to play.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, are there enough resources? I mean, I know the answer is always no, but I just wanted you to comment a little bit about the resources and maybe an unseen community that really needs a lot more help.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely we do not have enough, right? In being Miami, our system should be equipped to be in Spanish because, as you said, 60%, right? And the fact that sometimes we forgot that, right? That with a city where the majority are immigrants, forgetting that, it's devastating for these people because we come back to the same, to people trying to mimic those same strategies that they had in their countries of origin where there was no justice. And it's very paradoxical because we live in a country with the greatest justice system. But just
Absolutely.
Right? So, and you cannot understand that. Like, how's that happening? And it happens because they continue being ostracized, living like in another reality, unable to access our main system. And that's what we don't want. We want everyone to have access.
But I think there's also a portion of that falls on us. Meaning, I can't tell you how many websites I go to and they don't have a little translate button.
There you go. Yeah.
And how easy is that? Google does it for you. It's simple to put on your website. Yeah. I think there is still a prevalent attitude among everyone that if you're not speaking the language, it's your fault. You did something wrong.
You know what I think? The thing is, it's the concept of inclusion, right? We need to be more inclusive. And inclusion is so important, right? Because inclusion is not only LGBT.
Right.
It's just realize that we live in a very diverse society. Multicultural. And we need to be inclusive of everyone. And especially in the context of justice, I always say this, our great constitution says that justice should be served to all, justice for all. So if we do not make inclusivity a reality, justice is not going to be served to all.
What a great point.
And we are violating our beautiful constitution. Justice should be for all, and that's our fight. And in order to that to happen, right, we need everyone to feel comfortable and to feel understand and represented into our core systems, into our justice system in every place. And it's Miami.
But it's also cultural. I mean, it's normal when you hear someone speaking a different language to feel weird about it. Some people take it in different ways. The other day it was very funny. At a window, I saw a man come up to the lady serving and he goes, "Hola, ¿cómo está? Yo estoy aquí para un café." He's doing his best Spanish. I thought it was great. And she was saying, "What would you like? Would you like a croissant? What would you like?" And then he was getting frustrated because she wouldn't speak to him in Spanish. And he knew she spoke Spanish mainly, and she was only speaking in English. And then he got upset.
They were lost in translation.
No, lost in translation. He says, is my Spanish not good enough for you? What's the problem? She's like, I'm in America. I'm told to speak English. And it was like two ships passing in the night. And sometimes I think Miami is so much like that, including the same issue we're talking about. It seems like it's two ships passing in the night. We're not seeing these problems, these communities.
Or we don't want to see it.
Or we don't want to see
I guess the issue is that...
and it really comes down to affecting us and our own communities. It's for our own good. It's not...
It's not because we're forcing people to do anything. It's just because we need to get into the point to understand that what happened to one member of our community, sooner or later, it will affect us, right? Happened with domestic violence. I was recently giving a conference. I was telling people, right? Because it was funny. I was talking about DV and something related with business. And now people was like, "What this guy doing here?" But then I was like awkward. But then what I was saying, think about the amount of money that we have to invest into fixing and helping all these hundreds and hundreds of victims. It's a lot of money. So affect us. It affects us because it's our taxes. It's our money that has to be then invested in an issue that's not being cared properly as society, right? It's community in Miami-Dade County. So we cannot pretend that there's certain things that happen to others. Because at the end, everything that happened to others sooner or later will hit my door. And that's the way that we have to see our city, if we have to make Miami-Dade County a better city for all.
Absolutely. Listen, that's a great way to end the program. Francesco Duberli, wonderful having you here. Survivor's Pathway. Please keep up all the wonderful work. And we look forward to seeing everyone else again next week on the 4WardMiami show.
Thank you.